Was a family. Again, it is my honor to give the historical tribute today. The historical tribute is our continuing effort as a community to pay tribute to some significant, not necessarily famous person, place, or event in our history. Our commitment as a community is to keep alive in our hearts and minds at least 7 generations of our story and be reminded that our ancestors made great and meaningful contributions when they stayed connected to spirit, and that we must continually remind ourselves that if we did great things once before, we can do great things again. This is a tribute to an early warrior advocate. Callie House and the organization she co-founded, the Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association. To make demands for one, if not the most incendiary of topics in America. Reparations. Following the end of the American Civil War in 1865, a group of the newly freed black people, African people, met with Union General William Tecumseh Sherman and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton regarding their challenges going forward. They were asked a simple question: what do you need to support yourselves and your families? A Baptist minister named Garrison Frazier spoke on behalf of the gathered clergy of their unanimous and firm response: land. The response to the clergy's request was General Sherman's Special Field Orders No. 15, issued on January 16, 1865, which pronounced that each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground to supply their necessary wants and to sell the products of their land and labor. The designated land included the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia, as well as plantation areas 30 miles inland stretching from Charleston to Jacksonville. The order granted to each newly freed adult male claimant a 40-acre tract. In March of 1865, the Freedmen's Bureau Act repeated the promise, and by June of 1865, 40,000 of the newly freed had settled on the coastal lands and had begun growing crops. The newly freed were filled with hope. And then, on April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. In just over a month from President Lincoln's death, on May 29, 1865, the new president, Andrew Johnson, issued an amnesty proclamation pardoning the rebels and restoring their land to them. 2 steps forward and 40 acres back for the newly freed. And so, the practice of promises made, promises compromised, if not rescinded, became a fixture in the lives of the newly freed and we, their progeny. It is in the wake of the broken promise of 40 acres that the story of the honored ancestor of today's historical tribute, Callie House, begins. In the late 1890s, a new promise reached the ears of Callie House, a modest widow and mother of 5, who worked as a washerwoman, doing the laundry for white people for a meager wage, knowing it was deeply insufficient to meet the needs of herself and her children, as well as her people, the newly freed, 30 years removed from their bondage in chattel slavery, but now languishing in a new form of bondage, a perpetual source of cheap, hard, back-breaking labor. So, this modest woman of extremely modest means would invest some of her precious earnings, together with others in her community, to purchase a pamphlet sold by traveling former newspaper publisher Walter R. Vaughan. What would move those of modest, even meager means, along with others, to buy a pamphlet? A promise for a better life. Callie House, born in Tennessee in 1861, had the benefit of a primary school education, allowing her to read the pamphlet sold by Vaughan, commonly for $1, which explained that a pension bill, based on the pensions of Union soldiers, was crafted for ex-slaves, the brainchild of Vaughn and introduced as legislation by Vaughn's friend, Nebraska Congressman William J. Connell. The bill called for providing a pension of $15 per month and a bounty of $500 for each ex-slave 70 years old or older. Those under 70 would receive a $300 bounty and $12 per month until they reached the age of 70, when it would increase to $15. Those under 60 would receive a $100 bounty and $8 a month until they reached the age of 60. Those less than 50 would receive $4 a month, and at age 50, $8 a month. Under the law, the primary requirement was that a claimant had been enslaved. As you might imagine, Callie House, literate with life experience through Reconstruction and its ending, knowing the terror that black people, African people endured, and she, a widow with 5 children, surrounded by white hostility, but having to go forth each day in spite of the danger each day posed, she was like the others around her, interested in the promise the pamphlet announced, but wary of a white man from Selma, Alabama, claiming concern for the tattered condition of freed people. It would, however, soon become clear what his real motivations were: improving the economy of the South by having ex-slaves spend their regular pension money on goods and services offered by white-owned Southern businesses. So, while having genuine concerns about Vaughn, Callie House was nevertheless intrigued by the possibilities of an ex-slave pension bill contained in the pamphlet. She and cohorts then set out to learn everything they could about how Vaughn went about having a bill introduced to Congress. Vaughn explained the process of seeking out congressmen to introduce and sponsor bills, the lobby effort to push the bill through, and the petitions from citizens to show how the bill was helpful to their lives. After learning, discussion, and planning amongst her cohorts, Callie House would co-found the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association with a black school teacher and minister named Isaiah Dickerson, who formerly worked for Vaughn as one of his traveling agents. In 1898, the first convention of the association took place at Gay Street Christian Church in Nashville over 4 days, from November 28th to December 1st. Callie House would become a tireless worker for the association, whose charter was not only to turn ex-slave pension from a bill to a law, but also to provide as a mutual assistance to the mostly poor and elderly by providing money to those suffering from illness and injury, to the families needing to bury deceased association members. Her prolific work would eventually get the attention of the state and local governments and then the federal government. The government began tracking the association to learn what such a large group of black people all across the country was doing in the meetings that had been reported to them. To their surprise and consternation, nothing dangerous or criminal, but a growing enthusiasm for receiving ex-slave pensions. But as the history of all activism associated with black people, African people in America, from Callie House to the Civil Rights era to the Black Panther, Black Power, Black Liberation era, the government was hell-bent on putting a stop to grassroots movements involving black masses. After initially going after Isaiah Dickerson, who was first convicted of mail fraud and then having his conviction overturned due to the lack of evidence, the government set its sights on the face and beating heart of the movement, Callie House. The association made efforts to cooperate with the government, but it soon learned the government was not interested in helping the association operate legally. It was interested in stopping its mission altogether, even when it was clear that the association was sincere in its efforts. To destroy the association, they chose the main communication channel to the members around the country, the U.S. Postal Service. Unable to reach out to members and send and receive funds by mail, Callie House was forced to travel by train all over the country to keep work of the association alive and substantive. From 1901 to 1915, she and the association endured setback after setback until eventually Callie House was arrested and convicted of fraud, in which she was advocating for ex-slave pensions, knowing they would never become law, and therefore was engaging in fraud by continuing to do the work of the association. But prior to her conviction, Callie engineered a lawsuit against the U.S. government by demanding, you guessed it, reparations for slavery. The suit was based on cotton that had been sequestered by the federal government during the Civil War. When Callie House and the association learned about this, Callie wanted to invigorate the organization and members across the country with the lawsuit which it succeeded in doing, but would prove to be the last straw for her personally. The suit was thrown out for the very reason that has continued to vex supporters. You cannot sue the U.S. government unless the government gives you permission to do so. Go figure. After serving a year in Missouri State Prison, Callie House returned to her home in Nashville. Unfortunately, with her being absent, the association came to an end. On June 6, 1928, Callie House died at age 67. Callie House, Ma'at Keru, true voice. Ashe, Ashe, Asheo.